Don't speak. Just press play at exactly 8 p.m. Grandma's voice didn't tremble, but her eyes brimmed with something I'd never seen in her before. Not sorrow, not fear, something colder. We were alone in the kitchen of her narrow brick house on Cinderella Lane, the faint smell of burnt coffee clinging to the air. Outside, dusk pressed against the windows like an unwelcome witness. She slid a small flash drive toward me, wrapped in an old handkerchief embroidered with fading violets. Her fingers lingered on it for a beat too long. "It's about Barbara," she whispered. "I found out last night. Just press play at 8, and for God's sake, say nothing." My sister, Barbara, had always been the family's golden flame, shining in every photograph, speaking just loud enough to command the room, wearing that effortless smile that convinced strangers she was pure light. And me? Lisa, 27, the shadow in her periphery. The one who ferried Grandma to her endless doctor's appointments, scrubbed her floors, fetched her groceries. The quiet caretaker no one toasted at birthdays. No one, except Grandma. Which is why, when she learned what Barbara had done, something deep in her, something that had endured decades of loss and betrayal, finally snapped. Night came too quickly. The living room of our family home in Charles swelled with noise, Dad's laugh booming over the clink of glasses, Mom topping off wine as Barbara spun yet another perfectly timed anecdote. She basked in the applause. At 7:59, Grandma's gaze found mine across the chaos. A silent command. I crossed to the TV, plugged in the drive, and pressed play. The footage was pristine, merciless. Barbara, alone in Grandma's bedroom, phone pressed to her ear, unaware of the tiny camera disguised on the nightstand. "She won't last much longer," Barbara said, her tone light, almost bored. "Once the old hag's gone, the house is mine. Already spoke to the lawyer. It's all set. Lisa can keep playing nursemaid." Her words hit harder than a slap, a clean, slicing cruelty. The laughter died instantly. Dad's smile faltered, Mom's wineglass trembled. Grandma's face stayed unreadable, eyes fixed on the screen as if she'd been expecting every syllable. Barbara leapt to her feet. "This is illegal. You can't just." "I installed the camera yesterday," Grandma interrupted, voice like stone. "Someone tampered with my medication." The silence that followed wasn't mere shock, it was a suffocating, unspoken awareness that something rotten had been festering under our roof for a long time. This wasn't petty rivalry. This was calculated and Lisa. My stomach churned. I'd always known Barbara's vanity hid sharper edges, but this was venom. And without that hidden lens, she might have gotten away with it. Grandma rose slowly and placed a thick folder in my hands. The bank's logo glared up at me. "She went too far, Lisa. Now you'll see what she tried to steal from both of us." I opened it, my pulse hammering. Inside were forged authorizations, fake email printouts, and banking documents, all in my name, complete with a signature that was almost mine. She had posed as me to gain control of Grandma's account, using my role as caregiver as a perfect disguise. Grandma had learned the truth only because a bank manager had called, asking if the granddaughter who takes care of you would be delivering the paperwork that day or the next. She'd played along, fishing for details, until the name on the email appeared. Barbara. Grandma told me she hadn't slept after that, just lay there in the dark, staring at the cracked ceiling, feeling the blood drain from her hands as she realized what Barbara was capable of. By morning, she'd called a trusted friend to install the camera. Hours later, the recording captured the confession she already knew was coming. The video was just the opening shot. The real ammunition lay in my hands. And in that moment, staring at the proof of her betrayal, I understood this wasn't just a fracture in the family. This was an open wound that demanded retribution. A quiet storm took root in me that night, not the fleeting anger of a sibling fight, but the slow, deliberate kind that rots foundations before it topples walls. I could feel the same storm brewing inside Grandma, too. What cut deepest wasn't Barbara's greed. It was the years, the endless years, when her applause echoed through our family dinners while my name was barely mentioned. I had spent my 20s soaking laundry that smelled of antiseptic, pushing Grandma's wheelchair over uneven sidewalks, memorizing her medication schedule. Barbara spent hers posting champagne selfies from rooftop bars with captions like "blessed." And every time my mother said, "You should be more like your sister," it dug the wound deeper. But that night, denial was no longer possible. Barbara tried every angle, indignation, trembling tears, twisting the facts until they were unrecognizable. But the truth sat there, cold and solid, in high definition. My father swallowed his words. My mother left the room. Grandma didn't move, didn't flinch. She simply looked at Barbara as though lowering her into an unmarked grave. "You think you're clever," she said quietly. "I'm old, not stupid." She turned away, spine straight, dignity untouched. I took the red folder home with me, the one holding every document like a loaded weapon. Sleep was impossible. Every time my eyes closed, Barbara's voice replayed in my skull, not my sister's voice, but something sharper, hungrier. The next morning, I went with Grandma to the Dominion Bank branch in Eastmoor. She had one goal: make it official. But the moment the branch manager pulled up the security footage, my stomach dropped. There she was, Barbara, walking into the bank with an envelope and a fake ID. My name, my birth date, my altered photograph, staring back from the laminate. The manager froze the frame and looked at us, his silence an apology. The image was perfect, damning. Barbara sliding the ID across the counter, smiling as if she had every right. Grandma's hand clamped around mine. She didn't speak, only asked the manager to print every page, every report, and a copy of the footage. We left with the evidence in a sealed envelope. On the sidewalk, she stopped abruptly, the traffic noise swallowing her breath. "She's trying to bury me alive, Lisa," she said. "But now she's the one who's going to dig." It wasn't hatred in her voice. It was something older, heavier, the unspent rage of a woman dismissed for decades, now aimed with purpose. And then came the fracture I hadn't wanted to see, my mother's voice, caught on speakerphone in the video. Clear as daylight, encouraging Barbara to get it done before the old woman changes her will. That was the moment something inside me went still. My mother's coldness had always been a constant, but this conspiring to strip her own mother bare was a cruelty I hadn't thought possible. Grandma, the woman who had taken in my mother after her divorce, who had babysat her grandchildren, lent her car, and kept a room ready for her just in case. Now reduced to a financial obstacle. That day, revenge stopped hiding in the dark. It took shape. Grandma knew the perfect strike point, Barbara's image. She was Charles's darling, all charity drives, camera-ready kindness, and carefully filtered generosity. A brand, not a person. Grandma called a name from her past, Matthew, a local journalist with an iron spine. She handed him the files, the videos, and said, "I don't want gossip. I want justice." He studied her face for a long moment. "If this is real, she won't recover." Grandma's answer was clean, surgical, then clear the ground. "She's hitting it face first." By the time I got home, my world had tilted into something sharp-edged. Grandma, however, was already setting the next domino in place, a meeting with her lawyer. "You're coming," she told me. "You'll hear every word. Because after me, they'll come for you." I followed her to the glass-walled office of Mark. She stood before the mahogany desk, voice steady as she dictated her new will. "The house, the car, everything that's mine, to Lisa. And write it down clearly. If anything happens to me within the next 30 days, treat it as homicide. Immediate investigation." The words echoed long after we left. If anything happens to me, homicide. I'd never imagined hearing that from the same woman who taught me how to braid pie crusts on Sunday afternoons. But here she was, using the language of battle, planting legal tripwires, and daring anyone to cross them. The lawyer, Mr. Anthony, had the patience of a man who'd seen every kind of human ugliness. He read each clause with the precision of a surgeon, stopping only to ask Grandma if she felt she was in immediate danger. "I can't say," she replied, her voice flat. "But I'm not waiting to find out." He gave a slow, knowing nod and slid the papers across the desk. The ink on her signature was still wet when it became official, a new will, reinforced with a protection clause that named me, Lisa, as sole heir. Outside, on the granite steps of the Eastmoor office building, she pressed a sealed copy into my hands. "Keep this somewhere they can't reach." I locked it in the safe at my office before the day was out. That night, she stayed with me, her first night away from her own house in months. For a moment, I allowed myself the illusion of safety. It didn't last 12 hours. At dawn, my phone was a hive of missed calls and unread messages. My mother first, 27 missed calls, then Barbara, each message oozing counterfeit sweetness. Hey, Grandma, just checking in. Saw your name on the registry. So weird. Then the article dropped. The headline was modest, almost restrained. Local social media personality under investigation for attempted bank fraud against elderly relative. The body of the article was surgical, no names of victims, no sensationalism. But the screenshot from the bank's security footage was unmistakable, and by mid-morning it was circulating in every Charles group chat. By sundown, 2 brands had publicly cut ties with Barbara. Her glass castle was spider webbing from the inside. That's when my mother stormed up to Grandma's gate, shouting loud enough for the block to hear. "You've destroyed your own granddaughter over nothing," she screamed. "This is just a jealous old woman's drama." Grandma didn't raise her voice. Protecting yourself from criminals isn't drama. It's survival. And with that, she closed the gate in her daughter's face. That night, my phone lit up again, an unknown number, a single video file. Barbara sat in a dim cafe, facing a man whose body language was too casual for the words that followed. The audio was muffled, but one sentence cut through with icy clarity. "She won't last the month. And when she goes, we'll pretend it was natural." I replayed it twice before my vision tunneled. The man with her wasn't a stranger. It was Daniel, my husband. 10 years of marriage, a child, a home built together, and there he was, speaking about my grandmother's death like he was ordering coffee. The absence of hesitation in his voice was worse than the words themselves. This wasn't greed. This was conspiracy. I bolted to the guest room where Grandma sat reading, and without a word, I put the phone in her hands. She watched in silence. By the end, her fingers trembled against the armrest. "So," she murmured, "it's him. His name was on some of the forged documents. I just hadn't wanted to see it." We called Mr. Anthony and Matthew, the journalist. The file grew thicker, now stamped with a date, a location, and 2 faces I could no longer look at without disgust. Grandma wouldn't go to the police. "Not yet. First, we get proof of an actual attempt," she said. "Until then, we let them think they're winning." I wanted to scream, to drag both of them into the street and let the town see them for what they were. Instead, I changed every lock on Grandma's house, twice, before the sun went down. Within days, Barbara's social media accounts went dark. So did Daniel's. He claimed to be traveling for work. He didn't know I'd already locked him out of every shared password, duplicated every file, and taken Grandma completely off the radar. Now, only I knew where she was. And that's how it would stay until I finished what I'd started. While keeping watch over her empty house, I found something in the basement, a locked steel cabinet, its hinges stiff with years of dust. Inside, stacked boxes filled the dark space, brittle papers, old journals, and dozens of labeled VHS tapes. Each one bore Grandma's unmistakable handwriting, names, dates, times. Records. Evidence. A family history, captured in secrets. "Your grandfather kept these," Grandma murmured, brushing her fingers over the dust-caked tapes. I never knew why, but now I think I do. And I think it's time. That night, we chose one at random, feeding it into the old VHS player in the garage. The image wavered, all shadow and static, but the sound was merciless. It was my mother's voice, younger, sharper, her words slicing through the static. "If this baby's born, it'll ruin everything. I won't let that happen, even if I have to do it myself." Grandma's hand flew to her mouth. "She's talking about Barbara," she whispered. But I knew better. Because the name that followed through her choked sobs wasn't Barbara's. It was mine. I rewound the tape and played it again, each repetition driving the blade deeper. "If this baby's born, it'll ruin everything. Lisa can't grow up thinking she belongs here." Silence. Grandma's face went white, her denial crumbling. "She can't mean you," she said, but the certainty in her eyes betrayed the truth. And just like that, the years of icy stares, backhanded remarks, and constant comparisons fell into place. My mother hadn't just disliked me, she had wanted me gone before I could even take my first breath. But why? I spent the next day buried in my grandfather's journals. One entry caught like a fishhook, an unexpected pregnancy, and an unconfirmed suspicion that the baby's father wasn't her husband, but a man with political power in Charles. "If it's true, we're in danger," he wrote. Maybe I wasn't born into a family. Maybe I was born into a scandal buried under years of silence. And Barbara? She had always been the chosen one because she fit the spotless image my mother needed to parade in public. I was the crack in her porcelain mask, the reminder of a past she wanted to burn. Grandma looked at me differently after that, as if some missing puzzle piece had finally locked into place. "You were never the outsider, Lisa," she said softly. "You were the proof. And she hated you for it." And I understood now, this wasn't only about inheritance. It was about bloodlines, image, and the lengths people will go to protect their status. Daniel's silence during all this was telling. No calls. No messages. No demands for explanations. Just absence. It wasn't fear, it was disgust. The same brand of disgust my mother reserved for me. Now I knew its source. That night, I went back to Grandma's with a sharper plan. No confrontations yet. Not with Daniel. Not with Barbara. Not until I'd gathered enough rope to let them hang themselves with it. My revenge would be precise, relentless, and documented so thoroughly that when their worlds collapsed, they'd know exactly who lit the match. Grandma called me into her room after midnight. From deep in her closet, she pulled out a small wooden box. Inside, an unopened envelope dated 1996. "This came right after you were born," she said. I never understood it. The handwriting on the back stopped my breath. "You know she's my daughter. And if anything happens to her, I'm coming back." The ink was still dark, the loops of the letters confident and unshaken. My hands trembled as I held it. Grandma stared at it as if seeing it for the first time. "He never signed it. Your mother never spoke of it. She burned the letter inside, but kept the envelope. Like she couldn't throw away the warning." One name rose in my mind, unbidden, the same initials I'd seen scrawled in one of my grandfather's journals. J.S. I ran to the basement, tore open the journal, and there it was, pressed between yellowed pages. "Emily says the father is J.S. I don't believe it. But if it is, we're in deep." Emily, my mother's name, appeared again and again in my grandfather's journals, always shadowed by the same initials, J.S. Each mention was truncated, as if even on paper he was afraid to finish the thought. Whoever J.S. was, he carried weight. Influence. The kind of power that made people vanish in the headlines or in life. And now it seemed my existence had been the splinter in their perfect facade, the quiet obstruction to whatever prize they'd been chasing for decades. Barbara, sensing it, had only carried my mother's work forward, the urge to erase me. But my revenge wasn't about seizing power. It was about rebalancing the scales, about justice for years stolen under silence, dismissal, and manipulation. Now that Daniel's fingerprints were all over the conspiracy, it had shifted. It wasn't just justice. It was personal. I'd been sharing a bed with an enemy. That doesn't go unpunished. The next days were a blur of dust and paper cuts as Grandma and I sifted through the basement archives. Sometimes she'd go quiet, retreat to her room, and I'd hear muffled sobs. "I'm sorry I didn't protect you sooner," she told me once. I didn't answer. The guilt didn't belong to her. It belonged to the people who'd built a family name on lies. That week, I went to the records office for my birth certificate. I paid extra for a rush copy. When I opened it, my hands nearly gave way. The father's name had been crossed out in my mother's handwriting and replaced months later with a new one. The original name matched the letter in Grandma's box. Stephen Stiles. A man everyone in Charles knew, real estate magnate, political donor, permanent fixture at charity galas. The same man funding Barbara's image. The same man who, according to that original document, was my biological father and the same man my mother had tried to erase from my life. I dug deeper into Daniel's firm. He'd once asked me to proofread a client proposal and never changed the password. In 20 minutes, I was in contracts, emails, corporate filings. Then I found it. A folder labeled JS Alta Docs. Inside, a draft contract between Stiles and a shell company. In the corner, a red note. Prioritize release after resolution of elder, KM, Sandra. My grandmother. Reduced to 2 letters in someone's payout schedule. The plan was clear. Wait for Grandma to resolve, then pull the trigger on something worth enough to make them all dangerous. I copied everything to an encrypted drive, emailed myself backups, and printed 3 hard copies stashed in separate locations. From that moment, nothing lived online. When Grandma read the papers, she closed her eyes. That man always gave me the creeps. And to think he's your father. This isn't on you, I told her. Or me. It's on them. She nodded, then slid me a sealed brown envelope. Keep this. You'll know when. The next day, Daniel showed up, pressed blazer, rehearsed charm. Said he wanted to talk. We agreed on dinner. But the woman across from him wasn't the wife he knew. I let him touch my hand without pulling away, let him believe his mask still worked. Pretending was easy, I'd been raised among experts. Dessert menus came. He leaned in, voice low. I know you're upset. I never meant to hurt you. It was all circumstantial. I pulled the brown envelope from my bag and slid it to him. My voice stayed level. You've got 5 seconds to tell me the truth. If you open it and lie, it goes to the DA in the morning. His hesitation told me more than his words ever could. When he finally tore it open and saw what was inside, the color drained from his face. It was something only a guilty man would recognize. And in that moment, I knew Daniel wasn't confused, or trapped, or manipulated. He was all in. Daniel slid the envelope open slowly, trying to keep his composure, but his eyes betrayed him before the flap was halfway torn. Inside were 2 things, a copy of the contract linking Stephen Stiles to a shell company and a key card to the vault at his firm. The same card he'd sworn was lost 2 weeks ago. I'd found it in his jacket pocket, right next to a lunch receipt with Barbara's name printed neatly at the top. He forced a crooked smile. You've got it all wrong. The mask had already slipped. You knew he was my father, didn't you? My voice stayed low even. He hesitated. Barbara told me. She said you were plotting against your own family. I just wanted to protect you. I laughed, the dry, bitter kind that doesn't reach the eyes. Protect me? I'd heard the same script from my mother, word for word. If Grandma's so confused, so resentful, I said, sliding another page across the table, then explain why your signature is on these. His handwriting. The date. The same day he claimed to be out of town. I thought it was just a draft, he stammered. I didn't really read it. Pathetic. Cowardly. I stood, leaving the bill already paid. I know everything, Daniel. From the start. And you're going to lose more than you think. My hands shook as I walked out, but my head was high. Behind me, he stayed silent, drowning in his own filth. When I got home, Grandma was waiting in the living room with a folder in her lap, thinner this time, but heavier in weight. The name on the cover belonged to a charity foundation. This was Stiles's cover, she said. Assets disguised as donations. Inside, a forged power of attorney, Barbara's signature posing as Grandma's legal representative, dated just last month. Fraud dressed up as paperwork. And in the back, one more page. A summons. My name in bold at the top. Filed by a shell law firm. The accusation: unauthorized access to private work systems. Daniel's signature sat at the bottom. Barbara's name in the corresponsible party field. It wasn't enough to rob us. They wanted me buried in legal trouble before I could fight back. I stared at that summons for hours. It wasn't paper, it was a declaration of war. The next morning, I called a lawyer Matthew had recommended. I handed her everything: contracts, receipts, login records, signatures, timestamps. Proof so airtight it could choke. Within 72 hours, she filed the works: asset reversal, criminal investigation requests, petitions to void the forged documents. But the most devastating blow wasn't in court. It was in print. I asked Matthew for a quiet, stripped-down article, nothing dramatic, just the facts. Influencer under investigation for misuse of power of attorney on behalf of elderly relative. One verified name in the closing paragraph: Daniel, the attorney involved. The fallout was immediate. Daniel's firm suspended him, pending review. Barbara's sponsorships evaporated overnight. My mother's text came next: "You're tearing this family apart." She called it destruction. I called it justice. Daniel emailed me, begging me to stop, promising he could fix it and, of course, that he still loved me. I didn't reply. I forwarded it to my lawyer, who answered for me. Any further direct contact would violate the restraining order. That night, Grandma slept without waking once. "You're giving me back what they tried to steal," she said in the morning. My peace. And I knew then, this wasn't the end. It was only the first round. I knew it wasn't over, not yet. There was one thing no one else had seen. It came wrapped in yellowed plastic, buried in a bundle of untouched papers Grandma had found while combing through the last of my grandfather's archives. A second will. Not hers. Stephen Styles's. The document had been mailed to my mother years ago, then hidden away like it had never existed. Inside, in clean, deliberate language, it stated that if his daughter ever had a daughter, that granddaughter would be legally entitled to 50% of his unreported assets. By some perverse twist of fate, that granddaughter was me. And tucked near the bottom, in a discreet clause that read almost like an afterthought, if my legal heir is identified, all assets currently under the Moore Foundation must be fully transferred to her. The will was dated, notarized, and genuine. Even Grandma's hands shook when she saw it. He tried to acknowledge you, she whispered. Even if he had to hide it. She never told either of us, I said. It's too late for her lies now, Grandma replied, voice tight. My lawyer moved fast, filing the inheritance claim under the heir clause. The Moore Foundation, Barbara and Daniel's gleaming front for laundering and manipulation, was legally tied to Styles's name, which meant any asset under it was now mine by right. Not by request. By law. The notices went out. Within days, a court-issued freeze locked every account. Barbara raged to anyone who would still answer her calls, insisting the will was fake. It didn't matter. The evidence was already stamped and filed. Her voice had no weight anymore. Daniel disappeared from Charles. His firm quietly announced indefinite leave for personal matters. The press released the documents in small, precise doses. No sensationalism. Just fact. My mother sent me a letter in her own handwriting, calling me cruel. Accusing me of tarnishing the family's memory. What memory? The one built on lies, intimidation, and forged signatures? I didn't reply. Grandma's pride was quiet but unshakable. I could never have done what you've done, she said. I didn't need her praise. I needed this to end for the house, for the name, for the ghost of a family that was never real. So I filed for the dissolution of the Moore Foundation and demanded a full forensic audit. The appointed accountant uncovered what we already suspected: phantom companies, bloated donation records, transfers to a shell firm Daniel had registered under an address in the same condo complex where Barbara lived. The last missing link. Proof they'd been bound together until the bitter end. Prison was within reach. But first, I wanted something else: humiliation. I scheduled a single press conference. No tears. No theatrics. Just truth. Backed by documents and signatures they couldn't deny. The morning before it was set to happen, I found a plain white envelope on my doorstep. No return address. Inside, a single photo. My daughter, stepping out of the school gates. Behind her, a man in a baseball cap and sunglasses, a dark backpack slung over one shoulder. The image was too sharp to be coincidence. It was a warning. Grandma covered her mouth when she saw it. Do you think it was him? I didn't answer. Daniel was a coward. Barbara was venomous. Together, they understood one thing: the only way to stop me was through fear. But they had miscalculated. This wouldn't paralyze me. It would make me far more dangerous. By nightfall, I had moved my daughter to a secure location, changed her pickup schedule, and hired a private security team. I filed a report and notified my lawyer. There was no direct proof it was them, but the timing spoke louder than a signature. The conference was less than a day away. I wasn't canceling. If they wanted to test me, they were about to see just how far I could go. I spent the night laying out the documents in perfect order, by date, by name, by legal tie, until the truth was unbreakable. The next morning, I walked into the packed conference room with steady steps. Reporters lined the back wall. Old acquaintances from Charles filled the chairs. Faces I'd known since childhood turned toward me with wary curiosity. And I knew exactly what I was about to do to them. I didn't bring slides, videos, or theatrics. I didn't need them. I stood at the podium with a neat stack of papers and read line by line from the evidence itself. Signatures. Dates. Account numbers. The trail linking the Moore Foundation to Daniel and Barbara S. fraud. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't soften it either. I let the facts speak, each one a nail in the coffin they'd built for themselves. And then I ended with a single sentence that cut through the air like glass. If anything happens to me or my daughter, everyone in this room already knows who's behind it. The silence was complete. You could hear someone's pen drop 2 rows back. Then a slow ripple of applause, not for a performance, but for truth, for the courage to name it in public. That afternoon, my lawyer called. They've requested out-of-court mediation. They want this resolved quietly, no more headlines. I laughed. They were cornered animals now, still pretending to be respectable, still trying to dictate the terms. Tell them negotiations end tomorrow, I said. But not in their office. In court. I hung up and heard the crash from the kitchen. Grandma was on the floor, pale, breath shallow. My hands shook as I called 911. The paramedics moved fast, and within minutes we were in the ER. Diagnosis: exhaustion, low blood pressure, acute stress. She gripped my hand weakly. Don't let them take everything again. That night, I sat beside her bed, replaying every betrayal, every threat, every late-night whisper of strategy. She had been my shield through all of this. Now it was my turn. The next morning, I walked into the courthouse with the final folder. Daniel and Barbara sat side by side, their lawyers looking as though they wished the floor would open. The judge went through everything: the bank records, the forged powers of attorney, the foundation's misuse, every fraudulent transfer. Dates, amounts, signatures. They tried to twist the story, to turn themselves into victims. This time, it didn't land. Barbara's rights to any more foundation funds were suspended on the spot. Daniel's assets were frozen. A criminal investigation was opened. A court officer waited at the door for them when it was over. No shouting. No breakdowns. Just the clean, final sound of a pen scratching judgment into permanence. When the gavel fell, I stood. Daniel glanced at me once before dropping his gaze. Barbara didn't look at me at all. I walked out carrying the weight of the story and the quiet satisfaction of a victory earned without mercy. Back at the hospital, I placed the court order in Grandma's hands. She smiled faintly, her fingers tightening over the paper. You did what no one else had the courage to do. She came home 3 days later, physically weaker but unburdened. For the first time in decades, she no longer had to fear her own blood. I never heard from my mother again. I never looked for her. Daniel filed for bankruptcy within months. Barbara lost every contract. No one in town forgot what came to light. They weren't just disgraced, they became a cautionary tale. Exactly as I intended: clean, surgical, lethal. Now, the house they tried to steal is where my daughter plays in safety. The memories are still there, but they've lost their power. The truth didn't save everyone. But it saved us. And that was enough.